Welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Now. I'm Carly Iacono. Today we're diving into one of the most common and sometimes most frustrating situations investors face, the lease renewal. On paper, it sounds simple, right? Your tenant wants to stay. You want them to stay. Great, let's sign. But in reality, renewals can turn into chess matches and sometimes just outright games. Today we're going to talk about how to recognize when a tenant is trying to manipulate the process, how to hold the line with facts and strategy, and when it might actually be smarter to just let them walk away. Let's start with spotting the warning signs. A tenant who is gearing up to play games will often change their tone quickly. Maybe they were friendly and consistent for years, and suddenly every conversation is urgent and dramatic. Another classic move, the threat to vacate. You'll hear something like, well, we could always leave at the end of the term. Now, sometimes that's true, but often it is just posturing. Vacancy is still historically low, and it's just not that easy to reposition a retail property. Then there's the overnight market expert. This tenant suddenly has a list of comps that magically show rents half of what you know is accurate, or they'll claim financial hardship without providing any documentation. And let's not forget the delay tactics, stalling conversations until you're right up against the lease expiration, trying to create panic. The bottom line, if your tenant is quoting bad data, threatening to leave without a plan, or dragging their feet, you're no longer just renewing, you are now negotiating. So what do? First, you hold the line by knowing your numbers cold. What is the true market rent in your submarket? What's the current vacancy rate? What would it cost you really in downtime, TI, and commissions to replace the tenant? Next, you need to line up your options. Have conversations with leasing brokers early, and if possible, have a short list of backup tenants. Even if you never need them, just knowing you can replace your tenant completely changes the power dynamic. And most importantly, don't negotiate from fear, negotiate from data. Now let's move on and talk about the lease itself. You need to pull out your original document and study it. This is where the lease becomes your playbook. For net lease investors, the structure negotiated upfront often determines how much leverage you truly have at renewal. Here are the top clauses that you need to review. Number 1, your renewal option language. You need to know if rent is predetermined, tied to CPI, or set at fair market value. If it's tied to market rent, you need to confirm how market is defined, ideally with a broker panel or appraisal clause. Tenants will often push for below market extensions, so clarity here is critical to know how far you can push. Number 2, notice periods. How far in advance must the tenant notify you of renewal interest? Did they already miss it? Missed deadlines can void the option, giving you full control once again. Number 3, your rent escalation provisions. CPI adjustments, fixed increases, or step-ups written into the lease all offer different structures. Now, tenants sometimes forget escalators at renewal. If it's in the lease, enforce it. This is especially important with long-term net lease discussions. Number 4, default and performance clauses. Has the tenant complied with insurance, maintenance, and timely CAM reimbursements? In many leases, a tenant in default cannot exercise their renewal option. This is another powerful lever if they're behind. Number 5, short-term extension or holdover provisions. Check if your lease allows you to offer a short extension during negotiations. This could prevent you from being forced into a long-term deal on the tenant's terms while you're still not sure or you're exploring other retenanting options. The key takeaway, in net lease investing, the lease is your rule book. If structured correctly, renewal negotiations aren't really negotiations, they're just enforcements of the lease. And that shifts the power dynamic back to you. Now the exit strategy. Sometimes you need to just let them walk away. The smartest play could be to step back and say, you know what, this deal does not work anymore. Maybe market rents have jumped so much that releasing creates more upside. Maybe you can improve your tenant profile or use if you re-tenant. Now, it's not always easy. Vacancy can be very expensive, but sometimes the best renewal is no renewal. If the math doesn't work, forcing it only drags down your returns and affects the long-term stability and durability of your cash flow in your property. In closing, Your job as an investor is to stay calm, stay informed, and never let urgency override strategy. That's it for today's episode of Commercial Real Estate Now. If you found this useful, please share it with a colleague or investor friend who's facing a tricky renewal. And as always, thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next week.